Hey guys, so for those who don't know me, my name's Rachel, and today I finally decided that I would put together a video about my experience having breast cancer at the age of 25. So I was diagnosed with breast cancer in January 2019 and it is currently December 2020. So it's taken me quite a while to film this. So I thought I would do this in a bit of a few different parts, so it's going to be a bit of a series. So today's going to cover how I found the lump, and then being diagnosed, how I got told, how I told my family and friends, then all the other appointments that led me up to eventually sitting in the chemo ward getting chemotherapy. In February 2018, so a year before I was diagnosed, I was just feeling, I know it sounds kind of weird, but I was just sitting at work and I was just doing this. Like, I don't know, sometimes I just feel my chest, and it's not, I wasn't feeling my boob or anything, like I was literally feeling it. And I felt a lump and I was like, this is not quite right. It was literally, it was high. It was 1 o'clock on my right breast. So I left it a little bit and then I eventually was like, okay, it's not going, I'll go to the doctor. So I went to the really lovely lady doctor who referred me on to get an ultrasound. And so I booked in, and a couple of weeks later, I went to have the ultrasound and the lump was gone. It was not there. There was no trace of it. They couldn't find it, I couldn't find it. So I forgot about it. I just moved on from that. And then, so in December the same year, so 11 months later, I felt the lump again when I was just, I had my hand on my chest again. But yeah, so the doctor originally said that sometimes girls can get lumps in their breasts when they get their period coming and going because it's just their body changing and stuff. So I left it a couple of weeks just to see if it would go again, and obviously this time it didn't. So going through my diary, my first entry in January, wait, let me show you this actually. So this is my diary from last year. This is me entering everything in that I had to do. So January, February, these are all cancer, to do with cancer appointments. The whole year is just made up of these hectic appointments for cancer, dealing with it. So I had to get my life very organized. Okay, so I ended up going to the doctor in January 2019 to find out what the lump was that had reappeared. I was a little bit concerned, but I wasn't too worried because, like, I'm gonna get cancer at 25, seriously. But anyway, I went to her and she did the same thing, referred me on to get an ultrasound. And at this stage in my life, I was just packing to get ready for a 7-day horse trekking holiday. So a lot was on my plate. But yeah, so I had a doctor's appointment and I was a little bit nervous when I went in because I didn't know what to expect. I had an ultrasound a few days later, and I really thought I was going to get through this video. It's been, what, like a year and a half since I was actually diagnosed. So I don't have tissues, I've only got toilet paper. Okay, I'm back. I think what sets me off the most going through all this is remembering how I felt at the time. And it's scary, like it's not nice remembering that. Anyway, so I went in and I had an ultrasound. And I remember the lady, as she was doing it, I was looking over at the screen so I could see what was happening as well. And it was so clear, this big lump that was not supposed to be there. And then so I'm lying there just in this dark room. She went out to get someone else, brought them back in. They had another look and confirmed that there was definitely something there. And then they went away again and brought back a third person with a big needle to take a fine needle biopsy. And it hurt a lot. So of course I was scared, and I mean, I was alone, but that's because we didn't really expect it to be anything. So I was a mess and I was crying, and I remember like getting up, my ears were like full of water because I was laying down and crying. So after the ultrasound, I didn't have another appointment with my doctor for about a week and a half, but literally 2 days after my ultrasound, I got a call while I was at work asking if I could come in that day to see her. And of course I was terrified, because when a doctor calls you in early for an appointment, you obviously know that something's not quite right. So I went in. My best friend Eden was at work at the time, but I texted her and she was trying to meet me there just before my appointment so she could come in with me, but she arrived probably like a minute after I got called into the doctor. And my parents and family, everyone was away camping at the time because we had a couple of friends over and they were taking them away because no one actually thought I was going to get diagnosed with cancer. Yeah, she sat me down, the doctor, and said, yeah, it is suspicious of breast cancer. Because she was telling me the previous appointment that, oh, it won't be breast cancer, you're too young, like it's not going to be. So I remember seeing a piece of paper in her office. It said findings are suspicious of breast carcinoma, which is breast cancer. That kind of changed my whole world, that little moment. I was obviously a mess after that. Didn't go back to work. I called mum and dad and told them what had happened. They were a couple of hours away camping, so they obviously called the camping trip off and came straight home and to be with me. Anyway, so after that I was like, do I go on this big trip, which I've been wanting to do pretty much my whole life, or do I have to stay and do appointments and stuff? And it turned out I could go for 5 days and just have a total distraction from everything going on and then get straight back into appointments. So where we went was very, very remote. There's no cell service, there's nothing. We literally pack everything on our horses and go into the bush. So when I came back out and I was back in service, I had all these missed calls from random numbers and voicemails, which were from doctors. So I was straight back into being faced with cancer. So first up was a core biopsy the next day that I got back from my trip. I remember the doctor walking in and he looked exactly like Mr. Bean. He obviously wasn't funny like Mr. Bean. The core biopsy, it was so painful. It's like literally like a decorer on an apple. So it takes a big chunk out of lump, obviously. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. So at this stage, I hadn't really told many people that it was possible that I might have breast cancer. I was still keeping it kind of quiet because obviously it was a lot for me to deal with. I remember just driving in the car and crying and feeling like, what the hell is happening to my life? Like, this is not. I'm 25, I didn't. Anyway, being told that I had breast cancer was done in quite an absurd way, I think. Like, I think it could have been dealt with better, but I was sitting at my desk at work and I get a phone call from a random number, and I know now that, well, at that point I knew that I had to pick up any random number at any time of the day because it could be an appointment that I had to go to. So I picked it up and it was my doctor, and he said to me, unfortunately, it is breast cancer. And I kind of kept it together for a little bit, and then he's like, did you think it would be? Really? Like, that's what he asked me. As if you would. I mean, at that stage, after going through all those tests and seeing the lump actually being in there in an ultrasound, I had a very good inkling that it was. But still, I was hoping that it wasn't going to be, obviously. So after that call ended, I stood up and I was like, I have to go. Yeah, so I went home. Mum and Dad were away again, unfortunately, because we weren't expecting that call at that time, and they came straight home again to be with me. It was hard because I was being diagnosed with cancer, and here I was feeling fit, feeling healthy. I could do anything I wanted to. I was strong enough to do anything I wanted to. Nothing was holding me back. After my diagnosis call, I got another call from a breast care nurse, which normally when you get diagnosed with breast cancer, you have a breast care nurse and they help you with all your appointments. They give you all the information that you need. They're always there. And lucky our one where I live is the most amazing woman that I could have in my life during this time. So we went straight in with Mum and Dad. They came back in time to go to an appointment with her. She pretty much laid everything out for me. I was expecting, I'm diagnosed with cancer, maybe 3 months and I should be back to normal, but she told me it'll be probably like a year of treatment and then ongoing for another few years. So that was a bit of a shock to realise that it's not just, you don't just go in and get treatment and that's it, you're better. But she also told me that the majority of my treatment will be down in Westmead in Sydney, and I would lose my hair and I would be sick and going through chemo, possibly radiation. I'd have to have surgery. I remember at that point I started crying because when she told me that my treatment would be down in Sydney, all I thought of was like, what about Willow? Like, I won't be able to see her. So maybe that gives you an idea about how much Willow means to me if I'm in a moment where I'm being told that I have all these treatments and stuff, and she's my first thought is that I can't see her. She's my horse, obviously. Remember really vividly thinking to myself, am I going to die? Is this literally how I die? How long do I have left? Will I ever get to grow old? Do I get to do the things I've wanted to do? But I didn't want to ask the doctor because I didn't want to know. I didn't want to hear if it was going to be bad. I just wanted to ignore that for a while and hope that someone would answer it without me having to ask it. Family and friends, of course, were very upset as well. I remember Dad in particular was very much into researching the statistics of having breast cancer in Australia, and it's very good. The outcome was very good, and I found a lot of reassurance in that as well. My sister Natalie was away at the time. She was just starting to do a trip around Australia in her troop carrier. She thankfully was only about an 8-hour drive away at that time, so she'd only just started. So she came back after I called and told her what was happening. I remember Mum saying to me that being quite upset because like her first thought in there as well was my hair. I was going to lose it, and every doctor I went to told me that because, I think this, I had beautiful long hair. It was down to like my butt, it was blonde, it was natural, I'd never dyed it, I hadn't cut it in 8 years, I never straightened it, I never did anything, I just let it be. I brushed it obviously and washed it, but it was natural and I loved it. That was my favourite thing about me. But there's not much you can do. So just before all the craziness started of all my appointments, Mum, Dad, Natalie and I, our 2 dogs, Belle and Daisy and Willow, all went down to our favourite beach and had a beautiful afternoon. We took some photos, took some videos, last ones of my long hair, and so that day and those photos and those memories are something that I cherish really much. Okay, so now I'm going to run you through the next week after I was diagnosed and all the appointments, because that I think was the most hectic time of my life. I had to buy a planner, I had to answer all these calls, and I had to make all these different appointments, and it was hectic. It was very hectic. I'm so glad I kept a diary through it as well. It's just handy to know and remember all these different things. Like, I didn't go into too much detail, but at least I could lay down what was happening. I had to fly to Sydney, go to Westmead, meet my professor who would be helping lay out my treatment and surgeries. This is the piece of paper explaining everything. Basically, this is where my cancer was at the time. So this is normal. It's where it starts building into something. This is where it's built into cancerous, but where the cancer is inside, but still contained, and this is where it starts spilling out. So that's where mine was, which made it grade 3, which I think is, I don't really understand the grade. I then had to go to a fertility specialist because obviously I'm 25, I'm single, I have not even thought about kids, but going through chemo can reduce my chances of having kids, especially because I have triple positive breast cancer, which means that it is fed off estrogen. So I had to decide pretty much then and there if I wanted to go ahead and try to preserve some egg before I started chemo, which was meant to be in a week or 2. So I decided, yes, I might as well at least have the insurance of having some eggs in case I don't get my period back and I can't have kids in the future. So I had to inject myself every day with a little needle in the belly for about 10 days or so, and then eventually I had to go back down and have my eggs collected. After going to Westmead, we flew back home. I cut my hair. My best friend came around with all my family around me as well, and I put my hair in a plait and my best friend chopped it off. Well, I hadn't had short hair in a very, very, very long time, and it was something that I wanted to experience again before I actually lost it all. Like, I don't want to lose hair that's so long. I don't want to find chunks of that falling out. I think that would have tipped me over the edge a little bit more. I donated my hair to Variety Children's Charity because obviously they can use it a lot better than what I was going to. So the next week consisted of multiple blood tests. I had an information session at the cancer clinic with a bunch of other people who had just been diagnosed. I had another ultrasound and I had a heart scan, cut my hair again and dyed it pink because I'd never dyed my hair in my life. So why not do it when it's all gonna fall out anyway? I also had genetic testing done to find out whether I'm HER2 positive, which means that it is passed on genetically, and my results eventually came back after a couple of months and they were negative. It's BRCA. I also had my Port-a-cath inserted, which is what this scar is from. Basically it's, oh, I have it. It's fallen apart. I had my, why is it wet? So I had a Port-a-cath inserted, which is what this scar is from, and this is it. Except for it did have these tubes, like a whole lot of tubing connected to it. So basically this sat right there, and this tube went up and over my collarbone, into my jugular, and down into my heart. Creepy, I know. So basically the purpose of the Port-a-cath is that when I get treatment, instead of using the veins in my arms, it just goes straight in there and straight into my system. And if for anyone who's been diagnosed or is going to go through chemotherapy, I cannot recommend the Port-a-cath enough. It saved my veins, are still great. I can get bloods taken from them anytime. It just makes life so easy. They would give me a little patch that would numb the surface area, so when they put the needle in, I didn't even feel it. So very nice and easy and straightforward. So I had that inserted, and that hurt for a very long time because it was awkward and weird, and I guess my skin was stretching and there was a cut in the muscle, and yeah, not nice. My sister flew down to Sydney with me and we had my eggs collected. A whole dozen. I have a dozen eggs sitting in a clinic down in Sydney. So just before I started my chemo, my very first chemo, I had my first Zoladex injection, which I have since had every month. I have 21 of these needles. I'll show you a photo of it here. Hopefully I've got one. It gets injected into my belly and sends me into menopause. So I have not had a period since February, and I have hot flushes because, yeah, I'm in menopause. My ovaries and everything are shut down, so there's nothing that happens there. This is the bruise from my latest one. Nice, huh? So after I dyed my hair pink, I also dyed it blue because I wanted to try something else new. So during that time as well, I had a CT scan, I had a PET scan, and I had an MRI scan, just to cover all the bases. So during my scans, they also found that I had a spot on my liver. They didn't know if it was cancer or not, so this whole time, even still, I get MRIs just to keep an eye on it to see if it's changed, and it hasn't changed during chemo, so that's very unlikely that it's actually cancer, so they just keep an eye on it. So when Dad had cancer, I remember my big sister and I just talking and being like, oh, I wonder which one of us is going to get cancer. Just thinking that because Dad had it, one of us is obviously going to get it. Jinxed myself there. I'll tell you more about my experience with chemo in the next video, because I feel like that's something that should be covered separately and as a whole, because there's a lot going on, and I feel like there's already a lot being covered in this video. Alright, I think I've blabbed on for long enough. So if you have any other questions, just let me know in the comments below and I will try and cover them in the next section. So thanks for watching, and I hope you learnt something about my experience. I've shared quite a few videos and photos, and I will hopefully not take so long to film the next part. Alright, bye.